Hi, my name's Rochae. I'm a person in long term recovery. And what that means to me is I haven't picked up any mind altering substance since August 4th, 07. So, what it was like whenever I was in my addiction, I grew up in a home where drugs and alcohol were given. I was about 5 years old whenever I was sexually abused. What happened at that time is I completely shut off from the world. I felt alone. I felt disgusting. There's things that whenever I tried to build relationships, I just felt dirty. Like I could never be myself because if you knew what happened to me, then you wouldn't want to be around me. So my first drink was when I was 5 years old. My sister thought it'd be funny to get me drunk. And the thing is I can remember the first time that I drank. I felt warm and fuzzy and just dance around, but I can't remember my first kiss. So that should show you the impact that alcohol had on me, even at an early age. Not that I went out and started seeking alcohol at that point, but it did make an impact. So I tried to play every sport I could in school, and really that was an outlet for me. Because again, like I had mentioned before, I just never felt like I fit in. I had really good grades in school. I always tried to be the best of the best, and if I fell short, I beat myself up over it. So I ended up meeting this guy. He was the perfect guy because he had rims on his car, he had a lot of money, I thought, and he had his own apartment. So I thought, like, those are things that I looked for in a relationship early on. And I thought that he sold drugs. So that would be perfect because I was actually selling drugs at that time too. I got with him, I got pregnant with my first son. And whenever that happened, I completely surrendered. Now, I continued to drink and use, but it was a very abusive relationship. So things happened, like he kept me hostage in my own home. He threw me up against the wall, choked me out with my son in my arms. And so what happened at that time was I called my mom, which I hadn't talked to her about 13 years, and asked her to send me a plane ticket. So she did whenever he released me. And me and my son, which was 6 months old at the time, we flew to Florida. I'm originally from Oklahoma. So when we flew to Florida, I hadn't seen my mom, and a lot of things that happened whenever I was younger, there was like needles on the back of the toilet seat. She would sell our stuff, our cars, bruises up and down her arms. So, I totally forgot about everything that had happened. Whenever, I totally forgot about all that. And then in my mind, created this magical reunion whenever I seen her. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case. Whenever I got there, she didn't show up to the airport. She sent her boyfriend. And whenever I got to the house, it was different. It wasn't the needles anymore, it was prescription pills. And that was the time whenever all the pill mills started taking off, and she would get like 10 or 15 different prescriptions, and she became my pharmacist. I had never done pills before, but I had I felt so alone and just I had to have something in my system at all times. Now, keep in mind, I always drank alcohol, but whenever I would use different substances, if you told me that I was getting bad on something, if I was using something too much, I could switch to another substance. And that way I would prove to you that I wasn't as sick as you thought I was. I honestly couldn't see how sick I was. So I forgot about all the abuse. I really didn't care at this time. My sister called me and was coming down to Florida, and she said the only way that she could do that was my ex to come with her. And at that time, whenever they came down, I didn't really care about the abuse because I knew that they would bring drugs and alcohol with them. And at that time, that was the most important thing for me. So whenever they came down, it was still the same thing. Here's the thing, insanity, repeating the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. Not just did I do that with drugs and alcohol, but I did that with men as well. So they came to Florida and it just continued to be the same. I got pregnant with my second son, and the abuse continued until he ended up leaving. Now, what had happened with my children is DCF was involved. Quite a few different times they would show up at my house because I did glow sticks in the driveway, the loud parties and music. So they would show up, and of course, I would fly under the radar. And one time in '07, I was selling illegal substances, and the police kicked in our door. Now, they took my brother in law and sister to jail with me, and they took all of our kids in DCF custody. So I went to court a couple days after I was arrested, and I never felt like such a caged animal in my entire life. I felt empty, alone, and I just wondered, how I had gotten to this place. And, because I had hopes and dreams, and that's one thing that drugs and alcohol stole from me was all types of jobs, that I would succeed in, all type of dreams, self-respect. I couldn't look you in the eyes by the time I got into recovery. So those are things that I lost in my addiction. Well, I ended up, they ended up going into foster care. They split up my sons. And the whole thing is like I I just felt like the worst person in the entire world because here I am, I couldn't even be a mother. I didn't deserve to have kids because of, the way that I took care of them. I sent them to school with dirty clothes. I just was not a provider for them. So whenever I went to jail, I knew that drugs was a problem, but I'd never seen that alcohol was a problem. So what happened, I sat in there for about 3 to 4 months. And whenever I got out, I started going to church. I stopped doing drugs. I was going to outpatient to get my kids back. And all it took was for me to drink one time. And then it was just like a spiral. I always talk about how addiction works for me. So whenever I wake up in the morning, I have to have something, drugs or alcohol, in order to get up, like physically out of bed, because my body just hurts so bad and I'm so sick. So I get up out of bed with pills or something to drink, and then whenever that runs out halfway through the day, I have to make sure I have something in my pocket or something to drink. I would even take alcohol to my job. I would put it in a 7-Eleven big gulp cup and drink it sitting at my desk. And then at night, I would never just go to sleep. I would pass out somewhere. But whenever I passed out, I had to make sure that I had something to go on the next day. So I got out of jail. I was going to Goodwill outpatient, and I couldn't stay sober. So the judge at that time, he told me, "Listen, obviously this isn't working. So we're going to put you in residential treatment." And I begged and pleaded, and I told him, "Listen, I could do this on my own." And he said, "If you were going to those meetings, then you would know that this is the one thing you can't do on your own." So whenever I went to treatment, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. I did not feel comfortable in my own skin. I felt like my nerves were on the outside of my body. I didn't really want to talk to anybody, but they kept coming up talking to me. And it was just a very strange experience going through that with nothing. My counselor, he was an ex heroin user, and it was the first time that actually somebody I could relate to. I had a lot of judges and attorneys and everyone trying to tell me how to live my life, and I just basically blew them off because if you live the life that I lived, then you would do the things that I did. And that was just my excuse for everything. So whenever he started, talking to me and explaining addiction and just telling me where I'm at, that's what it took for me. It was the best thing that happened to me. So he told me whenever somebody comes in to bring in the story, they're from 12-step program, ask a woman to be your sponsor. And, let them have something that you want. So this lady came into Goodwill, and she could look you in the eyes. She held her head up. You know, she had a fiance. She talked about how her life was like mine, and now she's better. And I knew absolutely nothing about recovery. So so I asked her to be my sponsor, and she started taking me to outside meetings while I was still in treatment. As soon as I got out, she continued to work the steps with me and pick me up for meetings. And I was going for my sentencing. It was kind of strange how they did it. Normally, you would go to sentencing before treatment, but they sentenced me after. And it was really cool because I had about 13 people from the 12-step program come with me to my court hearing. And it was cool because we took up the whole back row. My friend at this time, which she passed of this disease, she said, you know, my public defender came up and he said, "Are you ready to go to prison today?" And I started crying because I was scared. And she said, "Don't worry about it, Rochae. God's got your back." And he says, "Yeah, I believe in God too, but you're still going to prison today." So at that time, you know, he went away. He was away for about 15 minutes, and he came back and he says, "Listen, I got you 3 years probation." And I said, "You didn't get me 3 years probation. God got me 3 years probation." So it's real easy whenever you're doing the right thing, going to probation, because I can pay my fines, I show up on time, I can pass drug tests. I mean, it's amazing. Because whenever I wasn't sober and I was trying to time out my drug test, and whenever I would not pass it, I would be like, "Oh, just give me another drug test. I'll pay for it." You know, just all the lying that comes along with my disease of addiction. I mean, I'm a liar, I'm a thief. So, you know, those are things that I had to learn in recovery. So, I ended up getting my children back, which I had created so much chaos in their life because I dragged them around in my addiction. It was really hard being a single mother, and at times I felt like giving up. And there were many times that I wanted to drink or use. But the awesome thing was I built a fellowship of women that no matter what happened, they would be for me and they would answer the phone. I never had that, you know, with my family. I always struggled with not feeling loved, and this totally changed my whole outlook, you know, because these women love me for who I am, not for what I can do for them. And whenever I was out there drinking and using, the thing is I wouldn't have anything to do with you if you didn't have anything for me. Like, I literally wouldn't go to people's house if I couldn't drink or use. I just had no use for anyone. So the awesome thing about recovery is I've received so many gifts. It was my mom that she drank and used for 55 years. She actually went into the rooms of recovery and she detoxed in my house, and she ended up getting 2 years of recovery before she passed. If that's the only thing that I got in recovery, it makes all this worth it. But I've received so much more. You know, my children, one of them is in recovery. He has 8 months. He actually went to jail, detox, residential, and now he's in sober living. And then I have my sister turned 21 sober. My older sister had a few months sober. So the thing is, you know, addiction runs in the family, but so does recovery. It's like a ripple effect. Now the thing is most of them aren't sober today, but they know where to come whenever it's time. Whenever I first got out of Goodwill, I had this boyfriend, which, like I had said, men was another downfall for me. I had this boyfriend and he was on house arrest, so he was the perfect man for me because I always pick the perfect ones for me, the sickest men in the room. This lady, I went to Sober Stock and she was carrying the message, and she had mentioned, "Listen, I actually have a ring on my finger to I made a commitment to myself and God that I would stay out of a relationship." And she said the reason that I did that was because I didn't even know who I was, what I liked, what kind of pizza was for me, what my favorite color was, because whenever I'm in a relationship, I focus 100% on that individual instead of on myself. And I was like, wow, that really got me listening to her because I was in the same boat. I could not figure out why I will always pick the sickest men in the room. And she says, you know what? I like that. I liked it so much that I did it again. And she said, and the reason why I always pick the sickest man in the room is because sick attracts sick. I went back, I broke up with that guy. I actually was sober for a year and a half. And then I met this guy he was absolutely amazing. He's never once cussed at me. I think he's yelled at me a total of 3 times since we've been married. He proposed to me on the Empire State Building, which that stuff doesn't happen to a girl like me. Like, those were the dreams that I had before I drank and used. Actually, I never even thought that far. Like, so many dreams have came true to me. Now, I'm not rich and famous, but the thing is like I'm happy with myself. I can look you in the eye. I can look in the mirror and I'm okay with me today. I'm healthy. I work the steps. I work with other girls, which is the highlight of my life. I to work with women to go through the same experiences or experiences, similar to mine. It's amazing to see them come out on the other side, to see the light come in their eyes, and to show me, like they're sober, dignified women today. So the thing is my what I want to tell you is that just don't give up until the miracle happens. If I can get recovery, then you can get recovery. And if my mom can get recovery after using them for 55 years, then you can do it. All you got to do is just follow suggestions. I know that there's multiple pathways. And for me, it was a 12-step program, but that doesn't mean that you can get recovery any other way. So thanks for letting me share.